in Iran, striking multiple targets in coordination with Israel. Explosions could be heard in Tehran earlier. Smoke was seen billowing throughout the capital city there. Iran has vowed to retaliate, and already there are other explosions that have been heard throughout the region. Israeli residents are being told to shelter in place in preparation for possible retaliation. The president, a short time ago, released a video statement on Truth Social shortly after the operation began. We're going to play that for you now as we continue our live breaking news coverage.
A short time ago, the United States military began imminent threats from the Iranian regime, a vicious group of very hard, terrible people. Its menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror, and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They've rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland. Just imagine how emboldened this regime would be if they ever had and actually were armed with nuclear weapons as a means to deliver their message. For these reasons, the United States military is undertaking a massive and ongoing operation to prevent this very wicked, radical dictatorship from threatening America and our core national security interests. We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will be totally, again, obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. We're going to ensure that the region's terrorist proxies can no longer destabilize the region or the world and attack our forces and no longer use their IEDs or roadside bombs, as they are sometimes called, to so gravely wound and kill thousands and thousands of people, including many Americans. And we will ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. It's a very simple message. They will never have a nuclear weapon. This regime will soon learn that no one should challenge the strength and might of the United States Armed Forces. I built and rebuilt our military in my first administration, and there's no military on earth even close to its power, strength, or sophistication. My administration has taken every possible step to minimize the risk to U.S. personnel in the region. Even so, and I do not make this statement lightly, the Iranian regime seeks to kill. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war. But we're doing this not for now. We're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission. We pray for every service member as they selflessly risk their lives to ensure that Americans and our children will never be threatened by a nuclear-armed Iran. We ask God to protect all of our heroes in harm's way, and we trust that with his help, the men and women of the armed forces will prevail. We have the greatest in the world, and they will prevail. To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or in the alternative, face certain death. So, lay down your arms. You will be treated fairly with total immunity, or you will face certain death. Finally, to the great proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond. America is backing you with overwhelming strength and devastating force. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future that is close within your reach. This is the moment for action. Do not let it pass. May God bless the brave men and women of America's armed forces. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless you all. Thank you.
You've been listening to President Donald Trump a short time ago in a recorded statement posted on his Truth Social account overnight, again detailing the U.S.-Israeli military operations targeting Iran that began within the last several hours. Among the comments he said, as we show some of the video from that region right now, he made very clear that his intentions were to, quote, devastate Iran's military, to eliminate its nuclear program, and ultimately to bring about change in the Iranian government. And the lead up to this, with that region on edge, the president, only a matter of hours ago before departing the White House for his Mar-a-Lago property, had said that he was in effect not happy, dissatisfied still with Iran's handling of the U.S.'s desire for it to back away from its nuclear program, but it had remained an unanswered question exactly what the intended result was from U.S. military strikes, were they to happen. The president here making clear that the desire is to complete many things at once. Again, regime change, to remove its ability to produce nuclear weapons, and ultimately to destroy its military. Specifically, he refers to its Navy. He says to the people of Iran, if they hear his message, in their effort to rise up, he says, it will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. We do have team coverage from around the globe, from here in the United States to the region. I want to begin with our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby. You can see my colleagues there as well, Keir Simmons, Richard Engel, and others. Courtney, let's start with this, if we can, with some of the details about what we know is taking place. It's worth taking a step back and realizing that the president, in effect, in this statement is making his case for war, even after he has now already declared war, as he notes there, without any congressional authorization right now. This is a very wide scope, and as we are reporting, the president is going much further than those initial strikes that took place in June of 2025, targeting just the nuclear program. Now it appears to be a much wider motivation that has led this effort by the United States and Israel.
Yeah, and we haven't really heard a whole lot of justification for these strikes and the threat that the president in that video called imminent tonight made to the American people. As you mentioned, he has laid out a very broad and somewhat lofty set of ambitions for what he wants to accomplish with these strikes. And that is, as he said, to annihilate the Iranian Navy, to end their ballistic missile program, which is pretty advanced and extensive, to also ensure they never get a nuclear weapon. But then he also talked about the Iranian people taking advantage of this U.S. military and Israeli military action for potential regime change, calling this their moment and saying that this is really the only time they may have for a generation to be able to carry out this sort of possible regime change. So again, very lofty goals here. And what that suggests is not a quick action, as we saw back in June, but a potentially sustained and ongoing campaign if, in fact, the United States hopes to accomplish those objectives. Now, we know the initial set of strikes by the U.S. military is targeting military and security facilities in Iran of the Iranian regime. The U.S. is using both airstrikes and naval assets, including Tomahawk missiles. Those are very targeted, longer-range missiles that give a little bit of standoff distance for the United States military, for those Navy assets. That means that they can fire them from a little bit further away, gives them a little bit more time if Iran were to retaliate directly from the source of those Tomahawks. But Peter, we still don't have a really good sense of exactly what the United States has so far, and exactly whether this is the first wave and when, if this is going to be like continuing for hours and hours and hours, if we're going to see waves over days. These are the kinds of questions we're still asking. And then very, very critically, we have already begun to see retaliation from Iranian ballistic missiles. That includes Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, it includes Qatar and Kuwait. Now, one thing, not only that those countries have in common, of course, that they're right there in the region close to Iran, but they all are home to U.S. military forces and in some cases U.S. military bases. We know that that Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, that is the U.S.'s largest air base in the region, about 10,000 men and women there at any given time. The majority of those people were taken off the base in recent hours. We've seen that happen before. That is generally done because of concerns about a potential base there, or excuse me, a potential attack there. We have seen Iran attack Al Udeid before. They did so after Operation Midnight Hammer back in June. So again, the questions that we still have out there are not only what did the United States hit, but we know that some of the retaliation has already been intercepted, but have any of those missiles actually been successful in striking U.S. military bases, U.S. military installations in the region? At least one missile appears to have gotten through in Bahrain. That is where the headquarters of the U.S. Navy in the region is, U.S. Fifth Fleet. It is an enormous installation there with thousands of U.S. military personnel, and very critically, that is one of the rare accompanied tours for the U.S. military in the region. That means the men and women who are assigned there are allowed to bring their families. They often live very close to the base. Again, we're working to see about any kind of battle damage assessment about damage to the installations, but also any potential casualties here, Peter.
Courtney, I want you to stay with us for a second as we have this conversation, again, looking at some of the images we're getting from that region right now. One thing that was striking in the president's remarks in that pre-recorded statement earlier is that he said about American forces, Americans in that region, he said, quote, we may have casualties, which is notable. He said that, in his words, often happens in war, acknowledging that this is war that the U.S. is now mired in right now, acknowledging the potential risk to Americans in that region. I want to get a better understanding of what our forces are throughout that area. We have witnessed and been reporting over the course of the last several months the buildup there, the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, among others. How broad is the U.S. force presence in that region? And can you give us a sense of, it appears clear this is going to go on for quite some time. What potential exists for the U.S. to sustain an operation like this?
So what's really critical about what the U.S. has brought into the region, there were already about 35 to 40,000 men and women in the region before all this buildup began. But it's not really just about the numbers of what the U.S. has brought in. It's really the capabilities. So advanced air defenses and advanced air systems like the F-22 fighter. The U.S. brought in about a dozen of those to a base known as Ugda in southern Israel. Those have the ability to do air defense suppression, so they can stop Iranian air defenses that would be able to potentially shoot down aircraft that are moving in to conduct airstrikes. That's really important. It basically creates a path, a clearer path for manned fighters to move in and conduct airstrikes. The U.S. has brought in F-35s on the USS Gerald R. Ford. That's now in the Eastern Med. Again, an advanced stealth fighter. But also critically, I mean, look, logistics wins wars, right? So they have brought in dozens of tankers, cargo aircraft, the kinds of things that you need for a potentially sustained air campaign. Because it's not just about getting those fighter aircraft in, it's also about keeping them in the air with simple things like giving them the fuel. We know that the ships there have extensive air defense systems. We know that the ships there, they brought in additional ships. So we now have about the Strait of Hormuz. There's the 2 aircraft carriers with extensive aircraft capabilities. So when you talk about just the firepower that exists there, it's overwhelming. And it's enough that the U.S. could sustain a weeks-long offensive campaign. But then there's the defensive piece, and that is really, really important here, as we've already seen as Iran begins to retaliate. Part of those assets also provide a defensive capability. So when you're talking about the destroyers there, they have a ballistic missile defense capability. That means that they can fire up a missile off the ship that will intercept an incoming missile. The F-22s that I mentioned in southern Israel, they have in the past been able to have an air-to-air defensive capability. What that means is they put them up in the air and they can shoot down an incoming drone or cruise missile. We've seen them do it before. So this has been it's been a large array of assets and weapons that have been brought in, but they provide both the offensive and the defensive capability. Now, all of that being said, what exists there right now as is not enough for a months-long campaign. The goals that the president laid out here are not quickly, unless Iran were to decide to completely capitulate. I mean, look, we have no idea what's going to happen over the coming days and weeks, but if in fact this were to be a longer sustained campaign, they would absolutely have to bring in additional capabilities. I would suspect that the USS George H.W. Bush, it's off the coast of Norfolk. It's a couple of weeks away from really being ready to deploy. They could bring that in with all of its associated ships and additional assets and squadrons. But Peter, at this point, what they have there right now is enough for a days or even a couple of weeks of a sustained campaign for both offensive and defensive.
National security correspondents here at NBC News. For those who are just waking up just shy of 5:20 Eastern time right now, we are reporting U.S. and Israeli airstrikes targeting a series of targets throughout Iran, specifically in Tehran there, as the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has made clear. This is operation, he says, focused on devastating the country's military, eliminating its nuclear program, and ultimately the president indicates an opportunity for the people of Iran to try to overtake the existing regime in that country. We are hearing now from some of the president's allies, even at this early hour, The Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, one of those closest to Donald Trump, who has been very hawkish in his desires to target Iran for many years, posting a short time ago, "As I watch and monitor this historic operation, I'm in awe of President Trump's determination to be a man of peace, but at the end of the day, evil's worst nightmare." He goes on to say, "Well done, Mr. President." The political debate will wait right now. We want to focus on the specifics on the ground. That includes the reporting of our colleague, NBC's chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who joins us now from Tel Aviv. Richard, not long ago, you were in Tehran there as that country, that region, frankly, has been on edge for weeks and months right now. Give us a better understanding of what you're hearing. We know there is, in effect, an internet blackout, which makes it very difficult to get specific answers to questions in terms of what was targeted and what the targets will be going forward. But what more are we learning as we speak?
So the internet blackout in Iran is not total. I have managed to speak to some people in Iran, civilians, and a government official. I spoke to a government official, exchanged a message, I should say, with a government official just a short while ago. And he described this as now war, open war. I asked about negotiations. The official said that in his opinion, the negotiations with the U.S. were never genuine. They were never real. It was all a trick, that the U.S. and Israel do this all along. This is now a regional conflict. We don't know how far it's going to escalate, but just in the last several hours, it has gone from preemptive U.S. And Israeli strikes against targets in multiple locations all across Iran to a regional conflict because, according to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Iran fired back in retaliation with simultaneous missile attacks against those same countries that Courtney just listed. All of those countries have confirmed that they were attacked by Iranian ballistic missiles, and they all confirmed that their missile defense systems were activated and shot down those incoming attacks. Also, Jordan, which wasn't specifically mentioned by Iran as a target, as a country that it had targeted, has also said that it knocked down ballistic missiles that were targeting Jordanian territory. So we are seeing a expanding regional war, and to put it into a broader context, Israel, which has also been attacked. I'm here in Tel Aviv, and we've heard air raid sirens. I was woken up this morning by an air raid siren. We've seen some of the Israeli missile defense systems in action over the skies above Tel Aviv. Also, Israeli defense systems activated near Jerusalem as well. There is now conflict from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to India. Because let's not forget that Afghanistan and Pakistan just announced an open war against each other. So we have a zone of chaos, a zone of conflict covering a large part of the world. And when you listen to what President Trump said his objectives are, and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel also put out a statement calling on the Iranian people to rise up, describing this as a long-term campaign, a devastating campaign. President Trump and Israel's objective has been made quite clear. They want to bomb Iran from afar with as much force as necessary to weaken the government to a point where the Iranian people rise up and overthrow the government. That is very risky. It is not clear at all that it will be successful because Courtney described all of the military assets that have been brought in, all the naval power, all the air power. But what has not been brought in this time are tanks. What has not been brought in are ground troops. This is the biggest military buildup since 2003 when the U.S. invaded Iraq. But when that happened, the U.S. brought in an invasion force to take over Iraq, oversee the transition to a new government, an occupation government, and then ultimately a new Iraqi government under U.S. supervision. This time, a totally different strategy. The strategy is to pound Iran so hard to take away its proxies, which are spread out all across the region, to take away its missile program, to eliminate its navy, to disarm Iran, to declaw Iran to a point where the Iranian people can rise up and finish the job. that is in a very unpredictable scenario. It is not clear that the Iranian people have that ability to rise up and take on a government, even one that is in this process right now of being dismantled from the air and sea.
Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent, is joining us from the ground in Tel Aviv right now. Richard, we're going to allow you to try to make some more calls to those you've been speaking to in Iran. We're going to get back to in a moment as you've been speaking about the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. We have also heard from him in the form of a statement where, to Richard's point, he does call on the people of Iran to rise up, saying, in part, he says this murderous terrorist regime must not be able to arm itself with nuclear weapons that would enable it to threaten all of humanity. He says our joint action will create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands. So it appears very clear that we are at the beginning of what is, at least in the eyes of both the U.S. and Israeli governments, an extended operation that ultimately will require the buy-in from both many countries throughout that region, but certainly the people of Iran to try to rise up and overtake the Iranian regime. I want to get to NBC's chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons. He is joining me from Dubai right now. And Keir, I was up early listening to your coverage right now. You make an important point, excuse me, about that region. The Strait of Hormuz there is really one of the chokeholds as we talk about the potential early in small area, 21 miles wide, as the graphic shows those waking up with us right now. Can you talk a bit about some of the ripple effects right now, including the fact that there are shelter-in-place orders existing at embassies in Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and that Bahrain has seen explosions in its country as well?
Yeah, and we should keep eyes on the Strait of Hormuz, Peter, because the Iranians were carrying out naval exercises there, and even at one point closed it for a brief time during this past week. But I want to just get to some breaking news for our viewers from here in the UAE. I think the first report of someone killed as a result of this Iranian response, missiles and drones. I'm looking down, Peter, just to look at the statement that I have from the UAE Ministry of Defense. I'm here in Dubai, as you say, and Abu Dhabi is the capital. I've heard from now myself multiple witnesses who have heard explosions around both of these cities, that there are military bases close to both of these cities. Let me just get to that news, though, of someone killed. The UAE Ministry of Defense says that, and this may explain the explosions, says that it announces a successful interception of several Iranian missiles targeting the country. And then it goes on to say the relevant authorities in the country also dealt with debris falling on a residential area in Abu Dhabi, resulting in some material damage and the death of an Asian national. Now, I've spoken to someone who's in Abu Dhabi today. They describe hearing three extremely loud, as they describe it, pops overhead, and think that pops which they believed were three missile interception bursts. That there is a UAE base near Abu Dhabi, Al Afra. US forces are based there. In every one of these countries, these bases have US forces. Again, just looking down, we do know from the Iranians that they have said that they have targeted here in the UAE and talked about bases in the UAE, as well as in Qatar, in Kuwait, and in Bahrain. So in Bahrain, they put out a message saying there was an imminent missile drone attack in Bahrain. Bahrain is a short distance from here. It is the home of the US Fifth Fleet. It is where the USS Lincoln ported for a short time just in recent weeks before it headed to the Arabian Sea, and is very likely now that aircraft carrier taking part in these attacks. Bahrain telling its people in Manama, the capital, and across that country, as a precaution, keep a safe room in home. It should be accessible, located on the ground floor. Bahrain is a relatively sleepy place, aside from the military bases that are there. People, I know people there. People will be stunned, shocked to be getting that message that they may need to shelter in place. And there are those reports that missiles have struck, or that there have been explosions. The difficulty here is that those explosions can be the air defenses, Patriot, for example, Patriot air defenses protecting these bases, or it can be contact, and we don't know right now. The Qataris, just to that point, are saying now that they, and this is their words, successfully thwarted attacks targeting the country's territory. And then just to Kuwait, they are talking about ongoing efforts to protect the airspace of the state of Kuwait. And I just wanted Peter to get to some of these statements from these countries where I am, and they go to the point that Richard Engel was making about the potential for escalation with all of this. So the UAE Ministry of Defense, for example, says such acts constitute a escalation and cowardly act that threatens the security and safety of civilians and undermines stability, and a blatant violation of national sovereignty and international law, that the Defense Ministry here says. And then it goes on to say the state reserves the full right to respond to this escalation and take all necessary measures to protect its territory, its people, and its residents. So there you have, and we also have a similar message from Bahrain. There you have these Gulf countries saying that they reserve the right to respond to these attacks by the Iranians. I'll just tell you one other point, Peter. There have been some reports around of possible explosions in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. I have contacted someone there. They say they haven't heard anything. So it may be that that's just kind of false reporting. In this, what you could describe as the fog of war, there will be a lot that we hear about that then turns out to not be the case. But this is what these governments have feared might happen, that Iran, facing the Iranian regime, facing effectively what it would believe as an existential threat, would lash out across this region and try to make things so difficult for the Trump administration that it backs down, and for the Israelis. And that goes to your point about the Strait of Hormuz. We haven't heard yet whether the Iranians have attempted to block that strait. But again, that would have a material impact potentially, you've got to think, on oil prices. And I suspect that's why President Trump said in his statement, I think he used the words, I can't remember the word he used exactly, but he's talked about heavily targeting the Iranian Navy. And I suspect part of that is about attempting to get ahead of attempts to block the Strait of Hormuz.
Continue to do your reporting. We appreciate your joining us at this early hour here on the East Coast. I want to share some reporting again as you're waking up with NBC News special coverage of the U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran, and now some of the response from Iran beginning to take place as well. We're hearing from my colleagues, Courtney Kuby, Gordon Lubbold, two of our national security leading reporters, telling us so far in the military operation in Iran, Israel targeted Iranian leaders, while the United States targeted Iran's ballistic missile and nuclear programs. That reporting comes from two U.S. officials. Again, to be very clear, this is a coordinated effort by the United States and Israel, and it is now our reporting that the Israelis focused their targets on Iranian leadership, while the U.S. targeted Iran's ballistic missile and nuclear programs there. That's notable because you'll remember in June of 2025, the U.S., with those B-2 bombers, among others, had that stealth attack focusing Operation Midnight Hammer on the nuclear program that exists within Iran. I want to get back to Richard Engel, our chief foreign correspondent. Right now, Richard, obviously we're in the early stages of this. This is clearly a much wider scope of the U.S. and Israeli strikes here. And as a result, we're also learning of some other attacks targeting American bases, including some in Iraq. What more have you learned?
So just while you were talking to Keir, there was another report, this time from Reuters, that an American military base in Iraq was also targeted, in northern Iraq, in the Kurdish areas. But to get to that, you could probably hear right now that the air raid sirens are once again in action here in Tel Aviv. We will see if there are any interceptions, any impacts. This is the third or fourth time this morning that we have heard sirens like this. First, the way this works is first you get an alert on your phone telling you that something is incoming, giving you some distance. And then when they become quite close, you hear the raid sirens themselves. And it's quite bright here, but you can see, or you might be able to see, these white trails in the sky going through the clouds. Those are Israeli missile interception systems fired up toward incoming fire I have not heard them explode. Generally, when there are interceptions, you hear the explosion of the impact because these interceptor missiles are quite large. So what the Israelis are doing is they are firing missiles at missiles with the intention of destroying them in midair. They are very effective. And there you just heard right now the explosion of one of those interceptors. Often a danger is that the debris, because these missiles are blown up in midair, so there's the danger, obviously, of them impacting the ground, hurting, killing people. But then there is also the danger of the falling debris from both the missile and the interceptor itself landing in the city. Those two interceptions taking place right over the built-up area of Tel Aviv, right in the center of the city. Now hearing what sounds like the second interception. They took place quite at very high altitude. That's why that explains the delay. We can see the interceptors going up first, but you hear the actual explosion often a few seconds later. So Tel Aviv once again now defending itself from an Iranian attack after Israel and the United States began this campaign this morning, launching what they called a preemptive strike against Iran. And by all indications, we are very much in the early phases of this, Peter, with Iran responding by attacking U.S. military installations all across the region.
And Richard, as we listen to your live reporting there again on the ground in Tel Aviv, Israel right now, it's striking. Obviously, this is the early stages of an operation that the U.S. and Israelis have made clear it is going to be sustained for quite some time. But in many ways, this does appear to be that type of regional conflict that many had feared for quite some time, where you're hearing from Bahrain that they are intercepting missiles targeting their country, perhaps U.S. bases there. We're hearing from Iraq right now that American military base there has been targeted. You're hearing the Israelis putting up interceptors. Iran is seeing a series of strikes, obviously, as they were the predicate for all of this, the United States and Israel targeting them. It raises the question, which is, how does this end? And while it's so early, clearly this does produce a situation where there's a sense of this sort of circular firing squad, where there are different rockets and missiles going in all different directions right now. The president's intention is that this ends with regime change in Iran. But Richard, you were in Iran not long ago. That is a very, very risky endeavor.
It is a risky endeavor. It is also very difficult to accomplish without boots on the ground. And President Trump's objective, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's objective, is to topple the regime. They've said that openly. They're calling on Iranians to take matters into their own hands if the regime is weak enough and carry out regime change. That has a whole host of things that could go wrong. And when you look at how much of the world right now is embroiled in conflict, you have Israel, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq, Jordan, all of them talking today, just today, about receiving incoming Iranian fire or Israel and the States firing at Iran. Combine that with the fact that Pakistan and India, Pakistan and Afghanistan just announced an open war with each other. So you have a war zone, a spreading war zone from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to India. That is roughly 3,000 miles of conflict zone, an area of the world that holds hundreds of millions of people. So the possibilities for this to be very long and with unintended consequences are very high.
Richard Engel is our chief foreign correspondent. He's on the ground in Tel Aviv right now. Again, you've heard sirens within the last few minutes. We heard explosions in the air, some of those missile interceptors there looking to fend off any potential incoming in that region. I think our Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker, is with us as well. I'm hoping, Kristen, there you are. I appreciate your being up early to help us detail what we're witnessing here, Kristen. We've heard from some of the president's allies. We heard from the president himself. If we pull back a bit here and look at this from the political perspective, this is a president who has made very clear from the beginning his desire to end the threat, in his view, from Iran right now, a president who ran under the guise of focusing particularly on domestic issues, the topic of immigration and the economy, said that it was an America First policy. I trust that we will hear from those within the administration saying that this is America First because it focuses on the security of American forces in the region and Americans here at home, with the threat the president has said that Iran was, in his words, approaching the point where it could hit the United States right now. But it's also striking that these attacks, this war, as the president describes it, took place without congressional authorization, and really before today, no real detailed communication of what the motivation was, why there was a need for the United States to go to war in this form at this time.
Peter, I think you're exactly right, and that is where the conversation will go here in Washington. I can tell you, I just spoke with one of the president's top allies, Senator Lindsey Graham, someone who has been very hawkish, calling for military action in Iran for quite some time. As you know, as you just reported, he said he anticipates that this military operation will last for days, if not weeks. He said the goal here is the elimination of the Ayatollah. The operation, he says, will be massive in scope, and its goal is the elimination of the Iranian regime. He just told the Wall Street Journal as well. He goes on to say, it has been a dream of mine for so long that the Ayatollah's murderous regime will be replaced by the people who seek a better life for themselves and their country. The question is, how does that exactly happen? Can that be achieved through military power and through the Iranian people rising up themselves? It is widely thought that regime change in Iran far more complicated than in Venezuela, Peter, and that speaks to your point about this debate of congressional approval. The calls for congressional approval will grow louder in the coming hours, I can tell you. And also, I think the debate within the president's own party, does this fit within that America First vision? There are going to be some skeptics, some of the president's own supporters undoubtedly, who have some real concerns about this. Will this cost American lives, Peter?
You know, Kristen, it's striking as we watch what's taking place right now in that region. It was really not even 2 months ago that the U.S. ultimately participated in the change of regime in Venezuela. I know you were there speaking to Delcy Rodriguez, who is the interim president in that country, the removal of Nicolas Maduro and what was that stunning American effort there that happened overnight, was able to remove him, bring him back to the United States, where he is now facing justice. And now, less than 2 months later, the U.S. is looking to try to do the same thing in a much more complex region, not Venezuela, Iran, with an Ayatollah who has been in place there for decades here. This is going to raise some real challenges that I'm sure we're going to hear from American lawmakers, some of the president's fiercest critics, about what he views as a wide, sustained effort. And to the point of your conversation with Lindsey Graham, this isn't a matter of hours, but days and likely weeks, and ultimately could require boots on the ground in some form to help support an effort to overtake the Ayatollah, for there to be a complete regime change in that region. This is a much, much bigger effort than the one we witnessed only a matter of weeks ago.
And Peter, we saw the debate play out in the weeks leading up to this. You heard Vice President J.D. Vance, for example, in an interview say, look, there's not going to be a prolonged military effort in the Middle East. And yet President Trump himself seemed to contradict that statement on Friday when he told reporters, basically, you can never guarantee that there will be a prolonged military effort. That's everything that President Trump campaigned against, Peter, going all the way back to 2016, by the way. But to your point about congressional oversight, there's already a bipartisan bill that is being proposed that would require the administration to seek congressional approval before any sustained conflict in the Middle East. Is that something that more lawmakers will now support in the wake of these attacks against Iran that we are seeing play out now with the United States and Israel? Will the calls for congressional approval and, quite frankly, Peter, congressional oversight grow louder? I can tell you, based on my conversations with administration officials, they acknowledge just how complicated regime change will be. Now, look, they say, yes, you can do it without putting boots on the ground, but how exactly does that happen, Peter? What are the mechanics of that? Their hope, as you heard the president lay out, is that the Iranian people will rise up. But that is risky and challenging in and of itself.
Kristen Welker is the moderator of Meet the Press. She's going to have a full plate on Sunday as we hear from lawmakers their immediate reactions to what we're witnessing, taking place right now. I should report, Kristen, while you were speaking, we're hearing from other colleagues right now that the Secretary of State, the President's National Security Advisor, Marco Rubio, gave individual members of what is called the Gang of Eight. Those are some of the leading members of Congress on both the Republican and Democratic sides. He gave members of the Gang of Eight and leadership a heads up about the operation. That heads up was given to them while the operation was underway. The staff, we are told, received notifications. I want to get to Jeremy Bash. He is a former chief of staff at the CIA, Pentagon as well, an NBC News contributor. Fortunately for us, on days like this, he has a breadth of knowledge about that region and some of the conversations that would be happening behind closed doors on a day like this. Jeremy, we heard the president make the case for this action as the action was already underway. He made very clear that the desire is multifold: one, to destroy the Iranian military, and separately to get rid of the nuclear program, and finally to topple the Iranian regime. Can you give us a better understanding of what a challenge this is, the president's desire that he just announced a short time ago?
Yeah, Peter. So I think of these targets in kind of three buckets. I think priority one bucket for the United States military working alongside Israel is the suppression of enemy air defenses, taking out missile launchers, taking out naval forces of the Iranian IRGC Navy, taking out Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and taking out command and control nodes. That's basically to prepare the battle space so that U.S. and Israeli jets and naval forces will have a much freer hand over Iranian skies. The second priority set of targets, or bucket two, if you will, as nuclear targets. Targets that involve the production or the enrichment of nuclear fuel. Iran does not have a nuclear weapon right now. That's important to note. So there's no risk that we're going to be hitting a actual nuclear weapon, but they do have stores of places where they were conducting enrichment facilities. I think also in this priority two bucket, I would say are missile factories and ammunition dumps, and then the leadership targets, the regime targets, not just the ministries and the headquarters, but actually the homes and the hideouts and the bunkers of the leadership of Iran. And then priority three, I would say, are all of the regional proxies and nodes of the Iranian regime, to include forces in Yemen and forces in Iraq. So this is a very extensive targeting package that the United States Central Command has had to develop. And our strategy, the United States' strategy, is really to do this through standoff weapons. We've been talking about no boots on the ground. That means we're going to be conducting these operations from air platforms and from naval platforms. As has been noted all week, Peter, we have two carrier strike groups in the Middle East right now. We've got the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group 12. We've got the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group 3. And those have F-35s. They've got F-18s. They've got electronic warfare aircraft. We've got the cruisers and destroyers and the submarines that accompanies those aircraft carriers. So we have a formidable military package arrayed at Iran. And the question really is Iran able to get off any of those missiles against U.S. forces in the region or against Israel?
Jeremy, as we heard from the president himself in his remarks a short time ago, he said, calling on the Iranian people to overthrow the government there in the days and weeks ahead. He said, it will be yours to take. He added, this will be probably your only chance for generations. Specific to that point about the president's desire for regime change in that region, you detailed both the Ford and Lincoln carrier strike groups in the region, the forces broadly throughout that region. What would it take? Can the U.S. succeed in its desire for regime change from a distance, or would that require there to be special forces or troops of any sort on the ground in that region, even though the president has made very clear that is not his desire?
It's hard to see how regime change can come about from airstrikes. And so you raised the most important point, Peter, which is what are the war objectives and how are we deploying military force to basically make those objectives more likely? I think our military force against Iran is really not even a fair fight. We don't want it to be a fair fight, by the way. So I think we have a asymmetric advantage over Iran. Yes, they can hit our forces, and I think the president said correctly tonight that there could be U.S. casualties. But I think we're going to have such strategic overmatch over Iran, and we can take out the regime. And I think really that's not a hard task. What's going to be hard is what comes behind it. What happens on the streets of Tehran, the streets of the major cities in Iran? Do the people actually rise up and take power? Will there be an organization of that power? Will there be internecine civil war activity? Will regime elements go after people trying to march on the Capitol? We saw that in Libya in the 2000s, and that's where the United States had to intervene to take out Gaddafi and to take out some of the Libyan forces that were going after the people as they rose up. So this is a very uncertain task. How are we going to effectuate a credible, sustainable, long-term, peaceful regime change, a change in the regime with air power alone? I don't think anyone has exactly that out. I think that's going to be the challenge of the administration in the coming days and weeks, is to make clear to the American people, to our allies and partners and people around the region, is what is our ultimate strategy? What's the end game? And how do we know when we've won?
Jeremy Vash is one of our national security experts who's joining us at this early hour. Jeremy, we're going to ask you to stay with us right now. To Jeremy's point, this is not the first U.S. operation in Iran, and certainly not the first that's taken place overseas since President Trump took office. You can count attacks on Syria, Iraq, Iran, Nigeria, Somalia, Yemen, Venezuela, the Caribbean, as well. But this one appears most likely to be the most sustained, as evidenced by the president's remarks a short time ago in a post on his preferred megaphone social media, Truth Social. NBC's Julie Sirkin, one of our correspondents covering the White House for us, is in West Palm Beach this morning. Julie, we saw the president post those remarks, about 8 minutes in total. If you watched it, you could see that there were slight edits in it, clearly something that was pre-recorded before it was posted, as the president made the case for war, saying, among other things, that the U.S. may have casualties. In his words, that often happens in war. Can you give us a better understanding about what we heard from the president in the waning hours before the strike began, and what, if anything, we know about the president's plans over the course of the next 24 hours?
Well, there's so many interesting statements, Peter, that the president had said, but 3 points stood out to me, and I want to just re-up those for our viewers. Of course, this video was posted several hours ago. I will note that he appeared to be wearing the same USA hat that he was wearing when he deplaned at Palm Beach International Airport last night, as we're trying to read the tea leaves of when potentially this video was put together and filmed. 3 main things that I just want to highlight. He said that this is going to be a massive and ongoing operation. Our reporting, of course, backs that up, that these strikes are going to be sustained. This is not one and done. This is not something more limited that we were thinking the president might take, a direction he might take, as these peace talks have been ongoing between his deputies, Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, the vice president, J.D. Vance, meeting with Omani counterparts just yesterday. President Trump, hours before that video message was put out, telling reporters as he left a political event in Texas that he is not happy with the direction of these talks. He again suggested that the Iranian government in Tehran needs to accept the U.S.'s terms, need to abandon their nuclear program. And of course, from the president's video, we see that they have not. And he warned of American casualties. I think that was so notable, especially coming from a president that campaigned on not starting new wars. His base, we know, has been concerned about the idea of American involvement. The president had said that there won't be boots on the ground, but certainly in an operation like this, he said today that despite his best efforts, he does believe that there could be potential casualties. We know the president takes that to mean both injured and dead. And of course, the president as well told the Iranian people, the protesters there that we saw rise up in the streets a couple of weeks ago, the same protesters that the president had said help is on the way for. Now the president suggesting this is their only chance to now take this opportunity, essentially putting this on them and pursue possible regime change, which we know some of the allies in the president's ears that you heard Kristen talk about there, including Senator Lindsey Graham, have been trying to push him toward. I also, speaking of Graham, just want to note a piece of his statement in which he said this operation has been well planned. It will be violent, extensive, Graham says, and I believe at the end of the day, successful. That just goes to show you that some members of Congress, certainly ones that the president speaks to often, know some form and fashion that this operation is going to take place. I also have new reporting, Peter, and talking to sources in the last couple of minutes, that we know that Secretary of State Marco Rubio had called some individual members of the Gang of Eight. It comprises some of the most powerful key members of Congress in both parties that sit on the Intelligence Committee, have access to this kind of information, members of leadership as well, that Rubio had placed those calls to them individually, warning them ahead of the prior operations, including the one that happened several weeks ago here in Palm Beach, Florida, with the capture of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. We know that lawmakers mentioned we're already getting some early reaction and criticism as well to this operation. I know we'll talk about politics later, but this is notable because Congress, the Republican-led House, is going to take up a piece of legislation in the next couple of days, Peter, trying to limit the administration's power to take actions like this unilaterally without Congress's input. So all of this is going to quickly become a political issue for the president. But at this point, of course, these strikes, trying to monitor and figure out the extent of the damage, how long that they will take place for, and the extent as well of those peace talks that we knew just 24 hours ago were still taking place. What happens to those? We were monitoring a potential visit for Secretary of State Rubio to take to Israel early next week. What happens there? A lot of questions at this hour, Peter.
Yeah, Julie, you're wise to raise those questions right now. And the political backdrop to this is critical, obviously, given the fact that the U.S. is now at war with Iran. Many lawmakers, some of whom were notified, some of the top leaders notified, as this operation was already underway, are certain to come out with real concerns about the president unilaterally, in effect, launching this war on Iran and whatever potential tentacles it has going forward throughout that region. I want to get back to NBC's chief foreign correspondent. That's Richard Engel. He is again with us right now from Tel Aviv. And Richard, obviously, there are a lot of moving parts all happening at one time right now. First, of course, was what instigated all of this, the U.S. and Israeli strikes taking place in Iran. Now we're hearing about some of the response. Iran with some public comments right now, and also we're hearing about an American consulate, some explosions near an American consulate in Iraq. Is that right?
So even while we've been on air, this has continued to escalate. So we talked about all the different countries that have been attacked by Iran so far. Just in the last few moments, the French news agency AFP is reporting explosions near the U.S. consulate in Erbil. Reuters reporting another wave of attacks against installations, U.S. military installations in an Iranian official, a senior Iranian official, the head of the National Security Commission, and I'm quoting, he said that a regional war has now started. And Israeli media, quoting Israeli officials, say that so far 35 ballistic missiles have been fired at Israel just today, just since Israel and the United States began these preemptive strikes. We've also been able to get in touch with a few people in Iran. There is a lot of confusion, a lot of concern, a lot of panic in the city right now. There is a great deal of traffic. The government is issuing guidance telling people that they should, if they can, get out of Tehran.
Richard Engel on the ground for us in Tel Aviv, Israel right now. Richard, as you stay with us, I want to ask you one quick question. Again, we're approaching 6 o'clock. At the top of the hour, we will reset for those who are just waking up with us, give you the very latest on what we're witnessing happening right now. Richard, as we were reporting a short time ago, two U.S. officials tell NBC News that there were multiple targets in the course of this effort in Iran this morning, that the Israeli targets focused on Iranian leadership, the U.S. targets focused on both the Iranian ballistic missile and nuclear programs there. As we focus on those multiple targets, this is so much broader in terms of its scope than what we saw last year in Midnight Hammer, isn't it? The president.
This is of a completely different scale than what we saw this summer with Operation Midnight Hammer. Operation Midnight Hammer was an Israeli-initiated war that the United States joined in. The United States had a very limited involvement in its military strikes. It hit the nuclear facilities primarily because it was only the United States that had the capacity to penetrate deep into the mountains using its very powerful bunker-busting technology to attack the uranium enrichment sites and to set back, if not destroy, Iran's nuclear program. This time, however, both Israel and President Trump have said the goal is regime change, that they want to weaken the government of Iran to a point that the people are able to take matters into their own hands and overthrow the government, continue the uprising that took place in every Iranian province only a few short weeks ago, an uprising that the Iranian government was able to suppress by killing thousands of demonstrators, according to multiple human rights groups. This is a far more ambitious, a far more open-ended mission than what we saw in the summer, because carrying out regime change, there's only a few ways you can do it. You can either go like the United States did in Iraq, with troops, bringing a group of new leaders with you. It's the same thing that the United States did in Afghanistan after 9/11, and occupy the country and try and manage the transition. That's one way. Or you can, what seems to be the strategy now, weaken the regime to the point where the people take matters into their own hands and overthrow the government. But Iran is a country that is covered in mountains. It has about 90 million people. It has many different groups, several different religious sects. The security forces there are quite strong. So you could not necessarily just see regime change. You could see state collapse and Iran breaking up into several different sections. The last way that a regime change could happen is there could be a military coup where you have so much pressure on the military that
Someone's right there. Someone here.
Do you see anything else?
the constant pace is far more preferable.
So right now, by the way, we have just heard that Iran's launched a new massive wave of missiles. These are missiles, not drones. So we're not sure what the targets are. We are hearing that explosions are being reported in Dubai just moments ago. Air defense is active over Dubai once again. It seems to be the Iranians are really honing in on Dubai. I'm not sure really what they're trying to there, because so far we've seen civilian attacks in Dubai, and it's pretty much been the extent of it. We're also hearing explosions being reported in Qatar. A major Iranian attack is ongoing there as well. So it is possible that maybe Iran is honing in on the partner states in the region. We're not hearing of the missiles heading toward Israel. They could be, but we're not hearing of that directly. So right now, Dubai, for whatever reason, is taking a lot of the hits. Is there some personal reason that Iran would want to do that, like to get even with them or something? Like, do they feel betrayed by Dubai? I mean, why are they targeting the center of population? That seems a little bit strange.
That's a great question. I actually have no clue why. Maybe it's because they think the UAE is a bunch of sellouts. Maybe like because of their heavy push on tourism and glamour. Maybe, but they don't really support U.S. military operations a whole lot.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. Also, by the way, I had to reverse course on one little thing here. Iran, some of those missiles are heading toward Israel, by the way, that Iran's launched. The IDF is asking citizens do not film the areas targeted by the missiles. I'm not really sure why that is, because, you know, if the missiles are hitting, they're hitting. So maybe they're trying to keep down the low what kind of damage they're taking. But Iran apparently has launched missiles at Israel. It appears to be most likely the northern part of Israel again. It appears to be possibly Tel Aviv, and that area is apparently going to get hit again, or at least they're going to try to hit it. So that is happening right now. So this is a full-scale missile attack on partner states, Israel, and U.S. forces in the region. So this is a pretty big one being launched right now.
Man, I got to say, the Iranian crash out has been unreal. I mean, it's even crazier, to be entirely honest with you, all that out of the two countries that could be hit, or the three of them that could be hit by the Iranians, it's the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain. Because y'all know how much the UAE plays middleman with the Iranians and tries to treat them kind of nicely. It's a lot. I mean, they've done that a load. And then in return for that, the Iranians thank them by bombing their civilians. I mean, that is something ridiculous right there. And then Qatar, like what's even crazier, folks, is that Qatar actually was the middleman for the Iranian terrorists in the Gaza Strip, Hamas. And they actually agreed in a trilateral talk that the U.S., Israel, and Qatar had that they would take on the Hamas leaders and let them live in exile in Qatar, just so that way the fighting could stop inside of Hamas, well, inside of the Gaza Strip. So then the Qataris went out of their way to do something absolutely insane like that to try and level out the situation between Iran and Israel, which is taking on a whole bunch of nut jobs in exile. And then in return, they get bombed by the Iranians. And then the Bahrainians, who have even stated in prior times leading up to this war that they generally didn't want the U.S. to use any of their facilities in Bahrain on an attack against Iran, then they get bombed as well. I mean, like, the Iranians are going around and basically showing everyone what you kind of get for trying to even appease a terrorist nation, which is getting bombed in return whenever the things go south and they basically just crash out at this point. Because we can only describe this sort of an attack at this point as a national crash out, because they're not even trying to attack U.S. military targets in most of these countries. They're attacking and killing innocent people, inside of all these different countries, which really kind of goes to show you why the hell the Iranians need to be dealt with, because if this is the way that they respond, is just attacking innocent people and killing them in a whole bunch of countries that weren't even involved in the strikes, that kind of tells you where their mindset would have been.
Happens, but certainly a very substantial change. It may also be a chance to de-escalate. It all depends on what the Iranians do. They can go one way, they can go the other.
Now, we know that essentially these were strikes by both the U.S. and Israel. This feels like a historic turning point, or could it be the start of something far more dangerous?
Oh, well, it's definitely historic for the United States to take out, or in Israel, we don't know which actually made the strike, but it was a joint effort. So the U.S.-Israel effort has potentially eliminated the supreme leader. It's historic. Whether it's positive, we'll have to find out. There is a chance that the whatever is left of the regime understands the capabilities of the combined U.S.-Israel force, and they go back to the negotiation table with a different perspective. Or this conflict of which all the gloves are off, including potential terrorist attacks against not only the U.S. military, the diplomatic presence in the region, but civilians, especially U.S. and Israeli civilians. We'll have to see how this goes, but right now, I think everybody is looking at this as a major milestone in this relationship, if you will, between Israel, the United States, and Iran.
So, can you walk us through what a leadership decapitation means in essentially a highly centralized system like Iran's? Does this weaken the regime's ability to retaliate?
So, like the way the system is set up, there's multiple facets under the supreme leader. So they are all interested, of course, in preserving the regime for their own, not only financial, but life, because these individuals have been brutally oppressing the Iranian regime for many years. And if they were ever to be held accountable, that would not go well for them. So they have all the interest in the world to continue the regime. But the question is, even if they do, and I think we should all hope that the opposition leaders that want to be more friendly to the West, that want to have democratic Iran do succeed. But the chances of that, I think, are unfortunately pretty slim, because the IRGC, the group that kept the regime in place, is still there with all of the motivation to remain there. But the question is, does this strike change their perspective? I think it might. We saw what happened in Venezuela when Maduro was removed. The remaining part of his regime started complying with U.S. requirements. So the question is that going to be the case, or is this going to blow into a major conflict that lasts weeks, months, and potentially even beyond that?
All right, Mick, I want you to hold on a second. Just hang on from there. We'll come back to you. Right now, I want to go to Marcus Moore, our correspondent right now in Doha, Qatar. Marcus, we know that you just witnessed a bunch of air defense interceptors essentially streaking across the sky right where you are right now. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so this is something that generally happens in a situation like this, where you have missiles being fired from another country to the neighboring country, and the air defenses are used to intercept those missiles, and that is what we have just witnessed. But what's so significant about it is how startling it is, or was, for people here where we are broadcasting live for you. When the first interceptions started to happen, or when that outgoing air defense interceptor was fired off, there was a loud boom, and the windows shook, and people screamed inside the lobby where we were, and around for you. But what you see is this steady stream of interceptors flying into the sky, and there's explosions in the middle of the sky. It really lit up the night sky, and this happening over the water where we were watching this. So on the other side of the skyline here in Doha. So that's what we have witnessed. There were also sirens sounding at the same time, and earlier in the evening, there were more of those emergency alerts that went out to cell phones across Doha, warning people to stay inside and to remain vigilant, that there is the chance for incoming missiles. And so that's what we're seeing. And if we think back to June, during the 12-day war, there were moments where there were volleys of hundreds of missiles being fired. And so I think when we look at how many air defense interceptors were launched just moments ago, it does give you a sense that perhaps there was another barrage of a number of projectiles, whether they be missiles or drones, that at this point we presume were fired from Iran to various targets across the region here.
And Marcus, just as you were speaking, we are looking at the Iron Dome behind you in Israel, actively seeing streaks across the sky, essentially going after some of those missile targets that are in there. I do want to also report our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, just confirmed that President Trump called her back and told her that he believes the supreme leader is dead, saying, quote, "I don't want to say anything definitely until I see things, but we believe he is." And much of their leaders are gone, not only from the one site, but two other sites we have also attacked. We had great intelligence, and so we think much of leadership is gone. Again, that was from our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, who just got off the phone with President Trump. Marcus, I want to get back to you. Qatar, they've also positioned themselves as a mediator with Iran. Does this news make diplomats there think about a possible opening for new talks, or are they bracing for essentially what could be a much more volatile relationship?
Yeah, Ike, I don't know if you can hear it, but there are more booms or explosions happening in the distance from where I am right now. This is what people who live here in Doha are enduring, and I have to tell you that it's not something that people here necessarily used to, perhaps like people in other parts of the region. But to your question of what the hopes would be among diplomats, I think most everyone in the region hopes that diplomacy will be given a chance to work. I mean, we look at what the Omani foreign minister said recently, that just hours before this operation was launched earlier in the morning, he was talking about there being some progress, and he felt like perhaps they were close to a deal. But then hours later, we know that the U.S. and Israel carried out the strikes on Iran. So I do believe that they are hoping that perhaps they can contain this and that not spread into a wider conflict. Because as you have noted throughout the day today, not only talking about people here in Qatar or in Israel being affected, but across the region, and even beyond that, when we talk about the potential economic impact that a wider war in the region would have on all of us as it relates to fuel and gas costs. So those are some of the things that diplomats are keeping top of mind as they try to renew their calls for there to be renewed dialogue, and for more than anything else, for there to be stability here in the region.
All right, I want to go to national security and defense analyst and ABC News contributor Mick Mulroy. First thing, Mick, I want to tell you about an alert that was just sent out to troops in Washington, D.C. These are the Washington, D.C. National Guard. From DoD alert, all personnel will maintain a high state of vigilance and prioritize force protection. Be aware of surroundings at all times, both on and off duty. They're being told to trust their instincts. From your vantage point, does targeting the supreme leader in Iran make the United States safer or more vulnerable over these next coming days, weeks, even months?
So, there's elements of both, right? So if you look at the strategic implication, the supreme leader was a sworn enemy of the United States. I don't think he had his speech in which he didn't talk about that to America. So in many ways, him being removed, depending on what happens next, is a big benefit to the United States. But in the near term, it's quite possible that the MOIS, which is the intelligence service, the Iranian CIA, if you will, has the capacity to get in the United States. They probably are in the United States. They can do targeted attacks, terrorist attacks. And I think one of the reasons why this alert went out to the National Guard troops in D.C. is they represent the United States. They're a very clear indication and somewhat vulnerable. They're just walking around Washington, D.C., and as we already unfortunately saw, they can't be targeted. So I think that's why this went out. I don't know for sure, but certainly the regime, if they feel that the driver is at risk, and it definitely is, they are probably willing to take the gloves off entirely and do terrorist attacks. I would imagine that there's some kind of intelligence supporting this alert.
I want to bring in retired Army Colonel Seth Krumrick. He's now the Vice President of Global Guardian. Colonel, you planned and led operations in this region. When you look at the reported killings of Iran's supreme leader, what does that tell you about the scale and even the precision of this operation?
So from a technical standpoint, it's exquisite. When you're able, they knew we were going to attack, and they knew that he was going to be a target, and they took every step they could to take and hide and protect their supreme leader, and he was most likely killed. So it just goes to show just how deep our intelligence penetrates into our adversaries. And that's not just, Iran, that's across the globe. I will say, though, we burned the bridge over the Rubicon with this one. Soleimani was a tough one when we killed Soleimani a few years ago. That one really got into the psyche of the Iranians. You started to see them make some bad strategic decisions after the Soleimani killing. But this one, there's no going back to the status quo. It's truly a complete game changer where we are now. And we're going to see what the risk level goes. But we are definitely in a more dangerous place, and we will continue to be for some time.
You know, Colonel, from your experience, when a regime is shaken at the very top, do you generally see security forces become more aggressive and unpredictable, or more cautious and reserved?
Usually it's more dangerous and more unpredictable. Whoever takes over power next is usually not as qualified as the person that was in power. And in a lot of cases, they'll overcompensate and be more heavy-handed. So I think there is a more than, better than average chance that you're going to see something along those lines. And here's the other thing. For the last 20 or 30 years that I've been dealing with Iran personally, there was always sort of a gentleman's rule in the background, parity. If we killed one of theirs or they killed one of ours, we would kill a number of theirs, but we would kind of keep things at an even check. You can see that going back 20 years, whether it was in the shadows, spy versus spy, or something more overt, like when they killed our service members in Tower 22 in Syria, and then our response, or where we killed a number of theirs. But those days are gone. Right now, the gloves are off, and if they think that they're going down, then they will pull every lever they have and be a true global danger on the way out.
I want to go back to national security defense analyst and ABC News contributor Mick Mulroy. Mick, in the hours and days after a leader is taken out, what are U.S. and allied military forces specifically watching or looking out for? Colonel, Piers Mick is not here. Colonel, I want to come back to you. You heard the question I just asked. Once a leader like this at the top is taken out, what specifically are forces, U.S. forces particularly, looking out for in the hours and days following an event like this?
I'm looking for three things. First, who's next in the secession line? Because make no mistake, secession planning's been going on. Who's next? Who survived the attacks? Who do we think is going to step up? And do we do a decapitation attack on them? Or is there a way to do some sort of détente with them, like in Venezuela, that Mick had just wonderfully captured before, and use that as an example? The second thing we're looking at are, what are the proxies doing? What's Hezbollah doing now? What are all those MOIS and Quds Force operators around the world doing? I think that's the critical piece. And then the third piece is, how is this actually consumed in the Iranian street? Once our missiles slow down and the Iranians come back on the street, what's going to happen there? And that is the biggest trigger to watch. That is the key indicator of how this is going to go.
But what indicators would you actually look for in terms of Iran's response, whether it would be a disorganized one or a coordinated response? Which indicators are you looking for to determine that?
Well, I think there's a combination. I think we're going to see if they can actually do a coordinated response, but I suspect we did a lot of damage to their command control communication network, so they're not going to be able to synchronize their various elements within Iran or globally, frankly, because we probably dropped a lot of their communication networks. Because what you saw with the overt missile strikes, there was a digital version of that happened that probably destroyed a number of their communication systems. So we're going to see what happens if they can coordinate a strike. And then the other thing is any response to protesters. Do they go heavy-handed and try to do what they did last month in January? Or do we see what happened like in the Egyptian street during the Arab Spring, and we see the military all of a sudden swing over and start following the protesters?
Retired Army Colonel Seth Crumrick, thank you for analysis. We'll have more news after the break.
And major combat operations in Iran. A vicious group of very hard, terrible people. These menacing activities directly endanger the United States, our troops, our bases overseas, and our allies throughout the world. For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries. Among the regime's very first acts was to back a violent takeover of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, holding dozens of American hostages for 444 days. In 1983, Iran's proxies carried out the Marine barracks bombing in Beirut that killed 241 American military personnel. In 2000, they knew and were probably involved with the attack on the USS Cole. Many died. Iranian forces killed and maimed hundreds of American service members in Iraq. The regime's proxies have continued to launch countless attacks against American forces stationed in the Middle East in recent years, as well as U.S. naval and commercial vessels in international shipping lanes. It's been mass terror, and we're not going to put up with it any longer. From Lebanon to Yemen and Syria to Iraq, the regime has armed, trained, and funded terrorist militias that have soaked the earth with blood and guts. And it was Iran's proxy, Hamas, that launched the monstrous October 7th attacks on Israel, slaughtering more than 1,000 innocent people, including 46 Americans, while taking 12 of our citizens hostage. It was brutal, something like the world has never seen before. Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terror and just recently killed tens of thousands of its own citizens on the street as they protested. It has always been the policy of the United States, in particular, my administration, that this terrorist regime can never have a nuclear weapon. I'll say it again, they can never have a nuclear weapon. That is why in Operation Midnight Hammer last June, we obliterated the regime's nuclear program at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. After that attack, we warned them never to resume their malicious pursuit of nuclear weapons, and we sought repeatedly to make a deal. We tried. They wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. Again, they wanted to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't know what was happening. They just wanted to practice evil. But Iran refused, just as it has for decades and decades. They rejected every opportunity to renounce their nuclear ambitions, and we can't take it anymore. Instead, they attempted to rebuild their nuclear program and to continue developing long-range missiles that can now threaten our very good friends and allies in Europe, our troops stationed overseas, and could soon reach the American homeland.
Tax Act is a gig worker's best friend. You might think their spouse or dog is their best friend, but when's the last
Finance the old way. Finance the ramp way.
Oh my God.
All my days over the beach club is fucking mental. Look at that. Literally directly above us. That's insane. They were so loud. That is mental. That is. Oh my God. I have no words. In the safest country in the world, city in the world. Wow.
Wow, looks like your hiring's making a lot of people happy. ZipRecruiter's new tool, Zip Intro, handles everything from finding great candidates to setting up interviews.
I invite His Excellency, Mr. Majed A. Abdulaziz, Permanent Observer of the League of Arab States to the United Nations, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, and I give him the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies,
ladies and gentlemen. I will speak directly to three areas today: the principles, the facts, and the way out. First, the principles. The UN Charter
But we're doing this not for now, we're doing this for the future, and it is a noble mission.
What you heard was a big admission from US President Donald Trump. He says American soldiers may lose their lives, that the US machinery may be destroyed. It tells you how massive this operation is. And the bigger the operation, the bigger the retaliation. Reports say there is a clear division of roles in this attack. Israel has deep knowledge of the Iranian leadership and regime. So the Israeli military is hitting regime targets in Iran. Meanwhile, the US military is targeting Iranian missiles and missile launchers. As always, Israel has released footage of its operations. Take a look.
This is 7 November 12th, Roger. Could you take your rodeo side off and check my tango side? Off out.
Israel has set ambitious goals. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants to denuclearize Iran, and he too is openly talking about regime change.
Together with the United States, we will strike the terror regime harshly. We will create the conditions that will allow the brave Iranian people to rid themselves of the burden of this murderous regime. This is your chance to establish a new and free Iran. Take your fate into your own hands. Raise your head. Lift your eyes to the sky. Our forces are there, pilots of the free world. Everyone is coming to your aid. Help has arrived, and I believe the day is near when Israel and free Iran will hold hands in favor of security and peace.
Pay attention to what you're saying about yourself, your family, your finances, your health. You're going to become what you're continually saying. That's why it's so important to get in a habit of speaking victory over your life.
Now, frankly, this attack was not a surprise. The US had assembled a massive armada in West Asia, so an attack was always coming. We've been talking about it on the show. Iran, too, was probably ready for the attack. In June last year, the Iranians took time to hit back at Israel, but this time they responded within hours. The Iranian military's trump card is its missile stockpile. Tehran is said to have more than 3,000 ballistic missiles, and they're firing these missiles in waves at enemy targets. But just like Iran, Israel and America are also better prepared this time. The US has positioned warships near the Israeli port of Haifa. Together with Israel, they're shooting down Iranian missiles and drones. As far as wars go, this is a strange one. Iran and Israel do not share a border, so there is no question of fighting on the ground. It's all aerial. Missiles from Iran take around 12 minutes to reach Israel. It's a 12-minute period, and that gives them enough time to intercept those missiles. And yet, last year, that 12-minute period was not enough. Almost 50 Iranian missiles hit Israeli cities, 50 missiles. And that forced Israel to agree to a ceasefire. But this time, there are two key differences. One, both Israel and the US are ready for a long and sustained operation. They're not hitting Iranian nuclear sites, they're hitting military and leadership targets.
Even at this very hour, Air Force squadrons and pilots are striking across Iran. We are all and behind them. The operation will continue for as long as required.
So that's the first difference, hitting leadership targets. Israel and the US are in it for the long haul. And secondly, Iran is even weaker than the last time. A lot of their missile launchers are being targeted, so Iran's ability
and the missiles managed to explode on the streets of the city.
What do you know of the succession plan? So if in fact Khamenei has been killed, there is a succession plan in place already, and we full well know that. It's going to take a lot to take this regime down. As I've been saying all day, they will fight to the very end if they go down. What do you know about who could be next?
That is a very difficult question to answer because we're still not sure who in the regime is still alive. Israeli media are talking about multiple senior officials, people who were very close to the supreme leader who have also been killed, leaders who were at the top of the Revolutionary Guard, leaders who were military and political advisors to the supreme leader. Israeli media reporting that they too have been killed. So whatever succession plans they may have had could have been disrupted today. So frankly, it was never very clear who would succeed Khamenei. If you remember, his most likely successor died in a helicopter crash that many Iranians still find quite suspicious. There was talk that Khamenei's son could possibly take over for him. He was not, however, seen as a particularly popular candidate. And now you're seeing, again, some more video that we captured from Tel Aviv a short while ago. And you can see the number of interceptors in the sky. Those are not satellites. Those are not stars. That was happening here in Tel Aviv a short while ago. Almost all of the incoming missiles were destroyed, but at least 2 of them did manage to get through this network and explode. In terms of the succession plan, it is an incredibly difficult question. And even if, as you said, the top leaders have been killed, even if these 2 reports are correct and the supreme leader himself is no longer alive, the regime still does exist. The security forces still exist. Many of them have said that they will fight until the bitter end. It is not clear at all who would take over, who would reconstitute this government. Earlier in the day, the Iranian government put out a statement saying that it was actively looking for informants. It was actively looking for agitators. It was calling. They were calling on Iranians to keep their eyes open and potentially turn in neighbors if they saw anything suspicious. So Iran is in a state of high alert. They are looking for people who are potentially spotting targets, who are potentially cooperating with Israel or the United States. So carrying out an uprising that President Trump and Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu are now openly doing, telling the Iranian people the time has come to take matters in your own hands and overthrow the government, it is certainly not an easy task when we don't know who may be alive, who might be dead, and with a regime that is under attack and a regime that has often resorted to brutality to suppress any kind of unrest or threat to its existence.
Richard, I'm going to ask you to stand by. When I come back to you, though, I'm going to want you to take off your Israeli press hat, put on your Iranian press hat. I know you were in Iran just a couple of weeks ago. I have a couple of questions for you and things that you learned on the ground there when you were there. But I want to go now to some breaking news that Courtney Cuby is following, our senior national security correspondent. Court, what do you have?
Yeah, so we can now report that a senior U.S. official familiar with the matter says that the U.S. believes the Ayatollah is dead. This is based on communications with the Israelis. So we are still working on more specifics. Obviously, we've been hearing about this for hours now. We had the tremendous reporting out of our colleague Kristen Walker, which you've been highlighting here this hour. And last, what the president told her directly, that they believe that it is a correct story that the Ayatollah was killed. But we are still working on a little bit more detail on that. Now, the key right here is, Yasmin, is what is the possible evidence for this?
Yeah.
And that's one of the big questions that we continue to try to work. Forgive me while I keep looking down because we're still working through the story as I speak right now. But again, at this point, we do have a U.S. official who says that the U.S. does believe that he was killed as part of this. Now, another big question is, what other senior Iranian officials may have been targeted by these Israeli strikes? And we do believe that there were a number of others who were targeted. But again, we are being very, very careful to verify that, in fact, who it was, not just targeted, but who may have actually been injured and or killed throughout this, what is a continuing, sustained air campaign against Iran, yes.
Can you give us a sense of the positions of the individuals that were additionally targeted on top of the supreme leader without kind of going too much into names, as we're still trying to verify that information here at NBC?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about people who are senior in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps leadership. So a combination of military and people who are directly involved in the decision-making for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So we're still working through whether there may have been others in the regime, so the political side, who may have been involved in this as well. But for now, we know that as far as the U.S. military goes, some of the sort of broad or vague guidance that we've gotten about exactly what the U.S. has been targeting includes Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps command control. So as part of that, it would stand to reason that there could have been members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps actually killed in these strikes. It's just not clear about the leadership yet. It also has become very clear, again, as the last 16 or so hours have unfolded, yes, that the Israeli military was targeting more of the leadership here. The U.S. military was targeting more of the military and security structure as far as sort of like the division of labor that they've taken for these strikes.
Courtney, I want you to, because I have a couple more questions for you. So I'm going to give you a second to take a look at your phone, more of your reporting. If you listen, I've been doing it too, so I get it. Because I want to go to Richard. He's been getting some alerts, and he may have to leave us. So I want to go back to him, and then I'll come back to you. Richard, if you could put that Iranian press hat on for a moment. You were there, what, 10 days ago, I believe, is when I spoke to you, maybe 2 weeks or so ago. You spoke to a lot of Iranians on the ground. You got a sense of the feeling there amidst these Iranians, what they wanted to happen after these brutal protests in Iran with thousands of people that were killed. I am getting reports from inside Iran that there are celebrations happening with the news now that the supreme leader has in fact been killed. 86 years of age. This guy has been in power since the late 80s after Khomeini, the original kind of godfather of the 1979 revolution, died. What did they tell you? What did they want to happen?
So yes, it was about just under 2 weeks ago that I was in Iran, and it was on. I've been there multiple times over the last several months. So one of the great privileges of this job is that you get to go to multiple sides of a conflict and talk to both sides. So when I was in Iran, I spoke to Iranian officials. They spoke mostly about this negotiating process. They were very anxious to engage in negotiations. They wanted to reach a deal. They knew they needed to reach a deal. And when I spoke to Iranians, citizens, people on the street, shopkeepers, they were openly angry. They were openly furious, I think you could say, with their government. They felt that the government was corrupt. They felt that it was ineffective. They felt that it had ruined the economy. That was what I think most people were suffering from the most. They said that the economy was frozen. They couldn't do business because of the sanctions. And then they were outraged by the level of violence that the government used to stop the protests. People told me that they knew people who were out protesting and saw the police open fire on crowds and just start shooting into crowds of people to stop protests. The government in Iran has a different explanation. The government in Iran says that there were peaceful protests that suddenly turned violent and became a terrorist uprising, and therefore they had no choice but to use force. When I was talking to Iranians, they didn't describe anything like that. They said they were people out on the streets, and that once the order was given, they believed by the supreme leader and by those around him to crush the demonstrations violently, that the forces of the Revolutionary Guard, particularly the Basij, which is a militia group that is responsible for maintaining law and order on the streets, and I saw them myself. They're often on motorcycles, usually dressed in sort of black plastic armor like riot police. They were all over the streets when I was there. People were afraid. They were furious. One man came up to our crew with a photograph of the supreme leader and tore it in half. Wow, this is not someone we knew. He was putting a lot of faith in us. He was openly tearing the photograph of the supreme leader. I've been to Iran quite a few times recently. I have never seen someone take such a bold action as to tear up a photograph in